kid who swings a golf club like a dream. I'd like to try to qualify him for the U.S. Amateurs.
Coming to Apple TV Plus.
What's your name?
I'm not into older guys, but I'm flattered.
A new comedy series, Stick.
I don't want to go on this trip.
Your mouth's saying one thing, but those eyes are saying something else.
From the home of Ted Lasso.
This is your shot at redemption? This is your mulligan?
Owen Wilson.
This game takes and it takes. The game's finally giving me something back.
Stick.
You know Arnold Palmer?
Iced tea, lemonade, mix it.
I'm missing a nap for this.
Streaming June 4th on Apple TV Plus.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Time for a new edition of Terry's Talkin podcast. I'm David Campbell, your host, and just back from what appeared to be a wonderful trip in Wyoming is Terry Pluto. Welcome back, Terry. Had a few days off, and then it looks like you really enjoyed it with Roberta out there.
Yeah, we went to there's a couple Wyomings. We've been out there a lot, although because of so much elder care and things that we've had, it's probably been 12 or 15 years since we've been there. Before that, we used to go there every year. But anyway, there's the Wyoming and the Tetons and Yellowstone. It's spectacular scenery in that. But there are so many people. There are. But there's so many other mountain ranges in Wyoming, and we went to one that's south of Laramie. It's called the Snowy Mountains in Medicine Bow National Forest. And look at places. If you ever want to go to Wyoming, I think it's worth obviously going to see the Tetons and Yellowstone and everything, but also look at other parts of the state where it's kind of wide open, scenery spectacular, and look at what you're getting here. Here you wanted to talk about sports, and you get a quick Wyoming advertisement. And when in Wyoming and anywhere around Cheyenne, you must eat at the Little Bear restaurant. By far,
really?
Great steaks and great walleye, and a family runs it. And you can talk to the son who's just graduating, getting ready to go in the Air Force. And it's, obviously this Wyoming is the ninth largest state. It's bigger than Ohio or whatever in terms of landmass. It has only 560,000 people living there. It's the state where the fewest people live. And it's a unique spot. And if you ever get a chance, look, if you don't like nature or whatever, skip it. Go to Chicago or New York or something. But if you do, and you could ever get a chance to get out there, go for it.
Yeah, and you in your newsletter this week, you shared a bunch of pictures, and they call it Big Sky Country out there. That whole part of the whole part of the country out there, and it is literally. It just goes on for forever. It seems like when you look up at the sky in those pictures.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's a line I wish I'd written. It's a Western writer by the name of Dan O'Brien, and he wrote a line. He said, in parts of those, you're on the big sky, the big plains. You feel like everybody can see you, only nobody's looking. It's like there's nobody around, and
that's
so
good.
That's good. So, unfortunately or fortunately, a lot of people are looking at the Cavs there, David Campbell, and they are saying,
yeah. Well, we're trying to figure out what to start with today, and I think that it seems like Cavs fans are kind of living vicariously through this Knicks Pacers series a little bit to kind of see what happens.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd start with the Cavs a little bit, and you wrote over the weekend kind of where you stand with Kenny Atkinson and how a year ago you didn't really think that getting rid of JB Bickerstaff was the right move. But you're standing behind Kenny right now. Why don't we start with that and why you think he's the right coach for this team going forward? Let's get into that, Terry.
And the second part of, I wouldn't have fired JB. The other part was when they were interviewing all those different coaches, I was an Atkinson guy. So
right, early on.
Mike Fratello and some other friends of mine Fratello even had Atkinson on his staff when he coached the Ukraine national team and others. So they told me Atkinson would really be good if the Cavs are going to make a change. And so I've not moved off of that at all. I think, as you mentioned, a lot of Cavs fans are watching this Indiana series closely because I kind of want to see, well, where's my team at? Because suppose the Pacers had gone and just got hammered by the Knicks. And you go, well, I don't know what to make of that then, other than I guess the 64 wins were just totally bogus and et cetera. Well, now we're seeing that series is 3-1. It's funny, Roberta mentioned this to me because we watched some of those in Wyoming at night, and she said, because she loves basketball, my wife does, and when they won the first two games, Indiana won the first two games in New York, she goes, oh, I think it's going to be just like the Cavs series. They'll probably lose one of those games at home, win one, then beat the next. And it looks like that's what is going to happen, because it is very hard to sweep anybody unless you're kind of like where the Cavs faced Miami, who just was barely made the playoffs. And so one of the things in that column on Atkinson that I wrote, and I said, sometimes it's just the other team's year. You look at them and you just say, these guys are cooking. So the Pacers entered the season after January 1. They had a 34-14 regular season record. Let me say again, 34-14. Then they, right now in the playoffs, their record is 11-3 as we speak. Knocked out Milwaukee in 5, knocked out Cleveland in 5, and they're probably going to knock out New York in 5 or 6 or whatever it takes. And that's, you just run into a team. They've been able to stay healthy, they being the Pacers, and they're just really good. But what I love about them, Halliburton's a star. There's no doubt about that. But they don't have the mega star that everybody, thinks you got to have the guy in the NBA, the greatest guy, whoever it may be, to win the title. And right now, regardless of who ends up winning this, I mean, maybe you could say one of those players in the West, SGA, Gilgeous-Alexander, obviously he's the MVP. But I mean, how many casual fans even know what SGA stands for? I'm very serious.
No, I know.
They're a team that's built on defense in that, and so I'm, from that regard, first of all, I love it that for the most part it's mid-sized markets in this, and secondly, I like how the basketball is being played, just in terms of who's doing it. And finally, David, I got to say, you brought this up, and we talked about it last week, and then they turned it into a post. The discussion of the officiating in the playoffs, how they
right, yeah.
I got a lot of reaction on that.
Oh, really? Yeah, we got a letter from KK, listener KK, who was wondering why it's two different games. One is physical out in the playoffs and one in the regular season, just to quickly summarize that.
Well, KK is right. I don't know why. I mean, I've been thinking, Roberta and I, so we kind of watched it close. Remember, Roberta played on her first women's team ever at Hiram College. And back when I covered the Cavs, she was often accompanied me to having lunch with Lenny Wilkins and whenever. I mean, her pastor was like at a game once with her and says, you really know this stuff. And she said, well, by osmosis, she's also bright. But anyway, we're watching this and we're going, why are they just letting these guys maul each other? It's, you've gone from wide open, nobody guards anybody. As Charles Barkley would say, every fool takes any fool shot from any fool where he wants, to let's go back to the 90s and let's have wrestling. It's crazy.
like going from Wyoming to London.
It really is. Yeah. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean, which one do you want? I prefer the wide open spaces, in other words. And we talked about this, and I feel more strong than ever on it. Last week, if I were the commissioner, if I were Nate Silver, I would come out and say, we are going in the playoffs to call it like the regular season. And this first round, you may not like it, but we're not going to have wrestling matches, and we're not. We are in the entertainment business, in the basketball business. And, because if you just call it enough and call enough fouls, you will clean it up.
Well, I question whether they even want to do that. I mean,
why would they not?
Because they like this in-your-face stuff. It makes for good highlights and guys getting in each other's faces and the hard fouls, and oh, this is the playoffs, and here's what it takes to win. I don't think they might change it. I think they're fine with it.
That would be fascinating, to talk to some of the coaches, see what they think. I'll tell you this. Mike Fratello called me, and we talk maybe once a month or where, so it's not like we're big friends. He called me after Denver got eliminated, and he said, and remember, Fratello played a very physical defense. This was not Pat Riley's, of the Lakers, Showtime or any of that stuff. And he said, "Did you happen to see what was done to Jokic in the Denver series?" And I said, "I just saw some of it." He goes, "They mauled the guy." He goes, "It was ridiculous." He said, "He is a joy to watch play, but they just turned into a wrestling match on him." And he said, "It's just not right." And I thought, wow, that caught my attention too. When Mike, who again coached physical
Yeah,
style,
that was
said
that
that.
was the way it was back then.
Yeah,
Even the regular
and
season.
right, and he just said, "No, this is not right." He thinks it's hurting the product. So,
I'm not disagreeing with that,
no,
Terry. I'm
no,
just
I'm
saying,
just saying. Yeah, go ahead.
so here's
Your
my
turn.
question to you. What if it doesn't change? What if the playoffs are always going to be more physical and more loosely called? How are the Cavs going to adapt to that? And here's what I'm getting at. So you see this in the NFL a lot. A team
Mm-hmm.
will hire an offensive coach, and then if it doesn't work out, they'll hire a defensive coach. Or if they have a coach who's a real disciplinarian, they'll hire someone who's kind of loose and free and lets the guys do what they want a little bit more. And it kind of goes back and forth. So the Cavs have gone from JB Bickerstaff, who was, and admittedly, he admits that he loves to teach defense and preach defense as the
Mm-hmm.
foundation of his team. And now they bring in Kenny, who's supposed to unlock Evan Mobley, and we saw some of that this year. More freewheeling, more creative offensively. So how if the playoffs are going to be like this, and the Cavs are stuck with this roster, I don't mean stuck in a negative way. This is the roster they have. Where is this toughness going to come from? And we got a letter here from Jim Mullen, longtime listener. And Jim says, "Hey guys, I know that on those great Bulls teams, Michael Jordan drove everybody hard in practice. He would not accept mistakes and less than 100% effort. Practices with Jordan could get brutal. Players would not dare loaf or go through the motions. Maybe practicing hard and competitively would help the Cavs." Again, that's from Jim Mullen. So I'm kind of tying this all together. Like, where is this toughening in this? In Donovan Mitchell said this in his post playoffs press conference. If you want to rip us, go ahead. We deserve it. That was basically his message.
Mm-hmm.
So where's this team's toughness going to come from? I mean, does it have to come from Donovan Mitchell? Does it have to come from Kenny? Where do they get this from if it's going to be like this?
Well, I think Kenny and Mitchell have to set the tone in practices. And Kenny also mentioned that he's not talking about brawling. This is not about throw Tristan Thompson in and have him arm wrestle guys. I mean, who is really arm wrestling guys, playing slow pace, but with the Pacers, for example? I would say, though, look at how the Pacers play. They never seem to get tired. Notice that they don't get tired. That may be really, when you talk about playing with force and that needs to be done with the Cavs, because for the most part, that's why it was. I mean, it was a genuine emotion from Rick Carlisle when Kenny came out. Remember, was complaining about the guys; they all got hurt in the first game, and this and Carlisle's like, "Well, this is the first for me in Indiana to ever be called a physical team." But and you go back and look at those. There was in that foul. It's like, for example, when Mobley got hurt, he came down and landed on an Indiana player's foot. Maybe there's some rules about you don't want to get your feet under there, but the guy didn't put his foot under Mobley to hurt his ankle. And then I don't know how Garland got hurt. Hurt his, I guess, in Miami, or I don't know when he got hurt with his toe. And then the only one guy that got kind of decked was DeAndre Hunter. I mean, this was not Bill Laimbeer throwing people into the basketball, stanchion or anything.
Right.
But the thing about Indiana, and I'm watching them going, they never get tired. They never get tired, and how they handle things. And they also keep a lot of the pressure off of Halliburton. He's not always bringing the ball up in this. Meanwhile, they're in your face, and I don't mean that, just bringing the ball up. So I would use that more of your model, because the model that they brought in Kenny for would have been what? What do they really want to do this year?
They wanted to diversify the offense and take Evan Mobley to the next level, right?
Right, and also just shoot more threes.
Oh yeah,
Right,
more threes and more ball movement and spreading the floor. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that was sort of the Celtic model and Golden State. That's what they wanted. And I still think that's viable, but then you've got to add the Indiana relentless pressure defense. Now, does that mean you've got to go out and maybe get some more role players who can play that, bring that, like Nemhart, Neesmith, and some of those guys do for the Pacers, something like that? That's what they need to look at. And they need to make their practices. Here's the thing about Jordan and those practices. The Bulls never got hurt. I can't explain it, but they never got hurt, it seemed like. And they being the Cavs, were so, David, concerned about injuries that that if they took days off, had guys that managed load management during the season, all that stuff. So they got to figure out how to practice, I do think, tougher and not avoid the injuries. It's funny, though, a part of the NBA, and we see it in the NFL too, is like, if I have a choice, I'll rather risk on doing less to hope not to get hurt than to have a hard practices or play a guy in a preseason game and have him get hurt and then kick myself over it.
Yeah, I mean, so there's kind of two things that need to happen here, right? They can either improve what they have, or they can go from outside. So I think we've kind of talked pretty in depth here about kind of what can happen from the inside. And there's gonna be I think there's gonna be times when if somebody's not performing, Kenny needs to bench him.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like it's like a hockey approach. There's times when your superstar in hockey doesn't play in the third period because he's not playing hard.
Right.
I think they could use some of that.
Or they'll pull a goalie, won't they, David?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. If you're not getting the job done.
I mean, to me, but stay with me. We're gonna go to your area. Do you think the hockey goalie's one of the hardest positions?
Oh, definitely. And there's a thing, like if a guy's just having an off night, you might pull him in between periods so he doesn't be embarrassed and have the long skate to the bench.
Yeah.
But if a guy isn't playing hard, you pull him in the middle of the period and make him take the long walk. And I just think there's room for that with this guy. I didn't see a lot of that this year, where
I agree.
Somebody wasn't playing hard defense. You know what, you're done. Like you're done for the rest of the quarter until you decide you want to play hard. And I agree with the practices. I think they need to kind of build and ramp up for the playoffs, and maybe it's controlled where you're not running, toward the end of the season. That's when you really ramp up the practices. You got to go intense. You just have to be ready for it. You have to replicate what you're going to see.
There's two things about it. I like the goalie thing, because it's like there are days you can see. I know we've been kicking on Garland some, but you can see he's just not guarding anybody or whatever, and he's worn down. And get him out of there. And you can go with that. Once in a while, Donovan's there. I'm careful with Donovan. I just think he is such a great competitor, and he's really about what your team wants to be about. And so it's.
But I do wonder, though, Terry, if it's time for him to go from being the nurturing kind of big brother, to more of what we were just talking about with Jim's email about Jordan. Yeah. And you got to get on these. Somebody's got to get on these guys, and there are not many. There's a few players on that team who can do that. Max Strus certainly has taken on some of that role, but I think it's got to be Donovan and him, and maybe somebody else, just getting on guys. This is not getting it done. This is not winning basketball. And we'll see. I'm really curious to see if that's the next step of evolution.
Yeah, I think I like the idea, David, that you're putting out there, and also practice as being more physical doesn't mean it's brawling. Often it means running. You know, playing pressure. Beyond, playing behind. That's what Indiana is good at, playing beyond fatigue for some of these guys. And that may be the next thing. Kenny comes out, and that practice may still only go 90 minutes or whatever, but those 90 minutes are fast paced, and get that ball up the court, get in people's faces and pressure them, that kind of stuff. So I like the idea of that. And I could tell after. I have to go back and look at the exact quotes Kenny said after they were eliminated, but he said that's one thing we learned from here is he talks about playing with more force, and I think that's what he means. I remember I was talking to, this is the old days when like Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan were two leaders of this, and some of the other players before the game, they would sit in front of their locker. Of course, the locker rooms are smaller, and you could talk to them. They were there for 20, 30 minutes, whoever wanted to come by. And Magic just loved all the banter. Barkley's, and you could Barkley in front of his locker was really uncensored and a lot of fun. But they also knew they were selling the game. But anyway, so we got into the subject with Magic. And I had brought up, pressure defense. I forgot who. I think it was Denver back then was pressuring a lot or whatever. And I said, you guys seem to handle that pretty well. He said, I'm going to tell you right now, no point guard likes to be pressured. And I go, did you hear me? No point guard likes to be pressured. He goes, you don't want to let anybody know it's bothering you. I said, you? He goes, I don't care. No point guard likes to be pressured. He says, think about it. Would you rather just dribble the ball up the floor, get past the midcourt line, and then just kind of survey the court? Or would you rather have to fight through whatever this guy's throwing at you, get past up there, and then try to find the open guy?
Yeah, and he's probably the greatest point guard of all time saying
yes,
this.
And he's big, he's
Yeah.
strong. So I was thinking, and you know what? Probably Rick Carlisle has he might even have a discussion with Magic. Who knows? He's been around forever. And he thought, you know what? I've got this team. This is how we're going to play. I mean, look at that. They are wearing Brunson down in that series. I mean, Brunson, but he's falling over. He's still playing well. He's another guy. It's a great. I just love his game in terms of his attitude. But it's like they're going to just wear you out. They wore Donovan out. And of course, part of it was that they didn't have to worry a lot from Garland. But I think you're onto it, David, that yes, Donovan getting tougher and some of the others in this style of practicing that is just more physically demanding, not physical in terms of fighting, but physically demanding.
All right, so we're talking about changes within the team. I think I just mentioned that a minute ago. Why don't we look at, there's a couple of trade possibilities that are kind of floating out there that I wanted to talk to you about. I think we mentioned last week this thing going around about the Giannis Evan Mobley concept. And Jimmy Watkins, our colleague, wrote a column about this on Monday. And his point was like, this will probably never happen in a million years. It's more of a trade machine dream for a lot of fans than an actual thing that can happen. But he said thinking about it can tell us about what the Cavs want to be. Do they want to win a championship in the next 2 years, or do they want to have like this long runway and take their chances, right? What do you think about that? And then I want to ask you about another trade that Chris Fedor has kind of tossed out there, but this Giannis Mobley thing that's floating around and kind of what it would mean for the Cavs. And you're against it, right?
Yeah, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what Mobley's going to be. And Giannis is 30, isn't he? I believe.
Yes.
Ninth year. There's a lot of miles on those tires, and maybe he does carry you. Maybe he doesn't. I don't like it where Kobe Altman said, we only go as far as Evan Mobley will carry us. No, that's wrong. That's wrong thinking. He's part of it, but you got to have other stuff. But Mobley, that's one of the thinking be when Mobley, if he becomes a great player, that is one of the big impetus of the Cavs becoming a great team. So I'm not in the mood to do that. But I get it. It's fun. It's like if you thought we just got to win tomorrow, okay. If I had to win tomorrow's game, I want Giannis.
Right.
But I'm not sure I want Giannis in 3 years. I really don't. And also, so that's why I wouldn't do it. What's your other trade?
Okay, so for those who aren't familiar, we have a thing called subtext, which we do on all of our beats. If you want to sign up for any of them, just go to the team page, cleveland.com/Browns or Cavs or whatever, and there's a blue bar at the top. And the deal is if you pay $3.99 a month, our reporters will text you like, hey, I'm going into practice. Here's what I'm thinking today about the team. So anyway, Chris, long story short, on our Cavs subtext, Chris Fedor sent this out. He says, hey, here's the general framework of a trade. And again, the Cavs are in the second apron, which really restricts you in terms of who you can trade and who you can move.
All right, here's a couple things about that, just so you know. Okay. For example, you can't if you were in a second apron right now for Giannis, it would almost have to be a straight up trade. You can't put together 2 guys to equal this other guy's salary.
Right. There's a
Yeah.
lot of restrictions in
A
terms
lot of stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
It kind of puts the handcuffs on teams so that they can't build these super teams
Yeah,
and
and
everything.
the reason they're doing that is they just don't. The NBA is very serious about giving its mid-market teams a chance. It really is. And yes, Dan Gilbert's the exception because like he'd be willing to go into 47 aprons to win, but not if it's going to hurt your ability to obtain other players. So I like that about the NBA. Good for them. You got to
and
do
we're
it
seeing
this
with
way.
OKC and
Yeah.
Indiana, right? And so,
Yeah.
So here's what Chris sent out. He said, "Here's the general framework of a trade." And Chris says, "I use general because of all the tax and apron restrictions. Curious what you think. Darius Garland to Orlando for a package including Jalen Suggs and Tristan da Silva."
I do it yesterday.
Really?
Yes.
All right. So Suggs would.
Well, I would actually, instead of the Silva, I would look at one of the Wagner brothers. But now here, all right, personal prejudice, all this. I love Jalen Suggs. I wanted him. I rated him over Mobley in the draft. Of course, I was wrong on that. But I will tell you, Jalen Suggs in the same backcourt with Donovan is a better fit. He's tough-minded. He can. I think he would even thrive in the offense with Kenny. And I've struggled. We've been talking about this, David, for quite a while. That combination with Donovan and Garland, I just have struggled with it come playoff time, and I still am.
All right. So Suggs would increase the length of the backcourt to 6'5", right? I
Yep.
think he's 6'5", but he last season after the new year, I think he had back spasms and
Yeah,
didn't play a lot,
that's
and
a problem.
then had some. I think he had some cartilage issues in his knee,
Yep.
and maybe in March I think he had an operation and was done for the year, and
Yeah.
so that's all going on. But he was averaging career high, I think 16.2 points a game and 4.0 rebounds. It's his 4th season. You're not worried about the injuries, though. It doesn't sound
Yeah,
like
because
that.
I'm trading a guy who has injuries.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
no, exactly. I mean, we're not trading, Iron Man Joe McGinty here, who pitched like every game for, I think it was your White Sox back in 1901 or something.
Oh, he was a real guy. I thought maybe it was just kind of a
No,
generic.
or old Hoss Radburn and, all those guys. But so, yes, I thought I'm very aware of that, but I also just think Suggs was the Minnesota High School Player of the Year as a quarterback. I hope I got that right. I'm 99% sure because I loved him in the draft. And I do know that Atkinson and Altman do like him. Now, there's nothing to do with the trade, but because I've told them both about, I'll tell you how smart I was. I wanted Suggs in the draft over Mobley. I remember Kobe Altman said, well, at least you wanted a really good player.
Yeah.
So
you weren't
again,
necessarily wrong. You were just different.
Yeah, right. It's not like when I said in that 2018 draft of quarterbacks, well, yeah, I'm a Josh Rosen guy. By the way, in Wyoming, I walked into the University of Wyoming bookstore where they were selling Wyoming jerseys of
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen, yes.
Yeah.
At least was my number 2 quarterback that year. But anyway, you go back to that. So my sense is they do like him. But I would trade because I don't know where he is with his contract and that. But I'm real open to a discussion involving Garland and Suggs.
Okay, so I'm going to put you down as in favor of that deal, and I guess we'll see if anything comes of it.
See how that comes of it, right? Structuring it, but I don't think Chris just throws stuff out to throw it out. That's not his style either, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, yeah, but also I think there's only so many teams that would fit for this kind of deal, and I think I don't necessarily think there's any reporting that this might happen, but he was just trying to put the pieces together.
But he may know, like I know, that they like Suggs.
Yes, yeah. And it's a good.
Now I can tell you this. I do know this from the Orlando end. They would be interested in Garland because they can't score 100 points.
So this is a trade again that could work for both teams.
It really is, and just that. And again, maybe because I've been in the Suggs camp forever, and he had a rocky rookie year, and I'm going, oh Lord, it's one of those I told you, like I feel fairly confident talking about basketball players, evaluating them, and that where I struggle more in football. And I'm going, did I just look at this stuff wrong on Suggs? And he just had I forgot what it was. He just had a rough year. And I think then they changed coaches or something after that. I think when Mosley came in, he just kind of grew. And so, yes, mark me down. I'm not
All
saying
right.
that's not straight up, but let's look at that. That's what I would say.
All right. Okay, so before we wrap up with the Cavs, a quick news tidbit. Man, I got to tell you, Terry, there's not many athletes that you see that like take your breath away when you
Yeah.
watch them play, but Sean Kemp was one of them, especially when
Yeah.
he was with the Sonics in his early days before he came to Cleveland and played for the Cavs and gained weight, had a big contract. But Sean Kemp, this last few days out in Tacoma, Washington, he pleaded guilty to a second-degree assault. There was a
Yeah.
shooting in a parking lot at a mall out there. Nobody was injured, but there was some testimony about people trying to break into Kemp's truck and him shooting it, went back and forth. But anyway,
Yeah.
he pleaded guilty and to a lesser charge, and it sounds like he won't be spending any time behind bars or anything. So that all kind of worked out in his favor. But Cavs fans he's kind of one of the most infamous
Yeah.
signings of all time.
This was one they were frustrated with the team with Mark Price and Larry Nance and Doherty getting stuck in the playoffs. So they decided to take a big swing. We love that term around here. And their big swing before the Browns made big swings was Sean Kemp. And I forgot all the details of that. But they brought him in to have a, quote, superstar. And what they didn't realize in Seattle is Kemp's personal problems were beginning to mount and that. So he comes in, he's huge. I mean, he's really put on a lot of weight. And they gave him this big multi-year contract before they even got to know him. By the way, on a personal level, Kemp to talk to was polite. I thought he was thoughtful. I like talking to him. Okay, let me say that. But, he had the off-court issues. But so he plays for a while. Then Gordon Gunn has a meeting was Gunn and Wayne Embry and I think Fratello. And Gordon Gunn told me this story. And this is in the book The Franchise that Brian Windhurst and I wrote together. And so he brings in Kemp and he has Kemp with like two 15-pound weights, puts one in each hand, and asks Kemp to walk around the office. He does. He walks around. Then he says, put them down. Now walk around again. Which is easier? And he said, because he was weighing like 280 at that point or something. He goes, you lose 30 pounds, Sean. It would be good for you. It was really an interesting thing. It didn't change anything, but they really were trying to get more out of him. And I just remember that. And you could tell by the way, Joe Tate loved Sean Kemp as a person. I guess they talked a lot. They got along well. But you just looked at him and you could tell there was kind of flawed in terms of how he was wired, how he approached things. He played a ton of minutes for Fratello early on. Then they had to make this huge trade. They were able to convince Portland to take him, and I forgot all the ramifications. Jim Paxson did the deal. He was a GM, and that actually kind of set the stage. That's when they went into tanking to go get LeBron or somebody else. But I just remember that thought. I don't know if we ever did that to somebody in our family and gave them two 15-pound weights and told them walk around the room and then put them down.
I remember hearing a story about Bobby Knight back in the
Yeah.
80s at Indiana. There was a guy named Marty Simmons who was there, and I think he was 25 pounds overweight.
Yeah.
And Bobby Knight, the legend has it, gave him a weight to run up and down the court with. So that's the only other time I've heard something like that.
But it's like, that's not a bad. Yeah, have them play one of those weighted belts and practice for 15 minutes and then take it off. All right, what do you think?
And Sean Kemp was not one of these guys. He wasn't like Tim Duncan, where Tim Duncan played a very graceful kind of thoughtful. Sean Kemp was like about violence around the rim and jumping high and blocking shots, throwing down these just memorable dunks. And he played a hard high impact game on his knees, and that weight, I think it just really
Yeah,
just cost him a lot.
it did, and my guess he was probably Joe Tate's theory was he was probably, 'cause Joe says I'm a stress eater, so is Sean Kemp, and now Kemp had, as I said, other issues off the floor, but when I saw that, I just thought of that story, and I thought, well, instead of an Earl Weaver story, you get a Sean Kemp story this week.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's had a lot of things going on in his life. We hope things will turn up to the better for him as time goes on, and best of luck to Sean Kemp. So, a Cavalier from many, many years ago as it stands now. So, all right, you ready to take a break here, Terry?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's talk Guardians when we get back. There's a lot to go through there. They have a big series coming up with the Yankees next week that I wanted to talk about too. So, we'll talk about that and more when we return on Terry's Talkin.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
It's the Smucker's Uncrustables podcast with your host, Uncrustables. Okay, today's guest is rough around the edges. Please welcome Crust.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic, he's round with soft, pillowy bread.
Hey.
Filled with delicious PB&J.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you can take him anywhere.
Why'd you invite?
And we are out of time.
Are you really cutting me off?
Uncrustables are the best part of the sandwich. Sorry, Crust.
Okay, we're back on Terry's Talkin'. I did want to mention Terry's newsletter. Terry, I learned something new about you, it seems, every month. So in your newsletter that came out today, and you can sign up if you want by going to cleveland.com/Pluto and click on the blue bar at the top, and you can subscribe right there. Somebody wrote you and said that about 40 years ago, they produced one of your plays at the Cleveland Public Theater in their new play festival. I had no idea that you've written plays.
Yeah, not very good ones, but I wrote a couple. James Levine was the guy who did. He was the founder of the Cleveland Public Theater, which I believe is still around. And they had a contest to send them in, and I love plays and drama, and I took a playwriting course at Cleveland State, a couple of them from a guy named J.J. Gary, who had actually a couple productions reach off Broadway. He was a director, and I got interested in that. And actually, the reason I talked about that is that even though I'm quote unquote a failed playwright, and the play wasn't very good, it was sort of a bad knockoff of a David Mamet guy who did Glengarry Glen Ross and American Buffalo, a couple others. But I learned a lot from that style of writing, just like I try to write some novels and struggle, but it makes you a better writer. And that's what I'm telling some of the people out there who are writing, try different formats. And just because that doesn't work right now, in that area. For example, this upcoming week, I did write a faith column about Wyoming, and it's a little different. Some of the faith columns are, and a lot of the playwriting / novel writing attempts I've made helped me to be able to write a different format. So if you don't be afraid to, the other thing, so you fail in this area, go try something else.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Changing what you are doing in a small or big way can really open new doors to creativity. I was just reading a thing the other day where it was a newsletter, and somebody was writing about when Steven Spielberg was filming the movie Jaws back in the 70s, and they wanted a real shark, like a mechanical shark, and they said, "We'll build you one, but it's going to cost $250,000."
Yeah,
and we can't guarantee it's going to last the whole movie. And Spielberg is like, we can't do that. Like, that's too much money. It's going to just bust our budget. So that's when he came up with the thing of like shooting the movie from the shark's point of view. Remember that in the movie where it was like the camera's swimming near the shark, and that was where all that came from, was because he couldn't use a real shark and he had to replicate what a shark would look like. And it just goes back to what you're saying, Terry, about sometimes if you change from one type of writing to another, or maybe you try writing poetry instead of
I did that
news,
too.
Right? Yeah.
I did that.
It's all good.
Yeah, all when I was in college, and so anyway, that was that's a good thing.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's get into the Guardians here. We are taping this on Wednesday afternoon, and the Guardians have brought up right-hander Andrew Walters from Columbus. ahead of today's game against the Dodgers, and Nick Enright has been sent back to Columbus after making his major league debut. Walter's 24, I think. I think he was a second-round pick by the Guardians in 2023 out of Miami, right? University of Miami in Florida. So we'll see how and when they can use him.
Yeah, Walters, starting early last year, I was writing about that they were, don't be surprised if he comes up right away, because he had the type of bio that could come up fast. I mean, for example, last year was his first year in pro ball, and while he was drafted in 23, he didn't start his pro career till 24. Yeah, he was a competitive balance round B pick, by the way. Mention that because that is the competitive balance round B pick coming up that the Guardians will get as part of the Naylor trade with Arizona. Anyway, yeah, the guy has a lot of talent. I guess he has sort of a tired shoulder or something this spring, but get somebody else in the bullpen that can help. I was sad to see Enright go just because the story was so powerful with him. You know, it's leukemia he's had, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think 2.5 years of treatment he went through.
Yeah.
Really something. So that was a great moment to see.
Okay, so yes, they brought up Walters. Okay.
All right, I got a couple of emails here, Terry. Maybe that'll launch us and we can see where you want to go with the Guardians. But let's try this first one from Neil in Jamestown, New York. And Neil says, hey, Terry, Vogt has a philosophy of playing everyone. That is fine with a deep bench, but on Sunday against the Tigers, the bottom of the order was Noel, Wilson, Hedges, and Jones, and they were hitting a combined 160. So how is this play everyone philosophy working out, and why are Noel and Jones still in the plan and right? And they are waiting for what to happen to make changes exactly. Again, that's from Neil in Jamestown, New York. We have another one here from Adam. Hey, Terry, my take is to dump Jones and give Noel some consistent playing time and at bats. They have to lose Jones and admit they made an idiotic trade. So that can bring us to CJ Kafis. Where do you want to go with this, Terry?
Well, first
There's a
of all,
lot to work through.
Tyler Freeman for Nolan Jones is not an idiotic trade. It's a nothing trade. I mean, just to be, specific. But all right. First of all, we've talked about, and I wrote about Kafis at least a month ago now, I think, and when he was starting to hit. He is hitting right now at AAA. He's hitting 326. He's had 98 plate appearances. He's got 4 homers, 13 RBIs, 326, 956 OPS. And if you roll in what he was hitting at Akron early in the year, it's 342 with 1,000 OPS. Left-handed hitter. He's played 12 games in right field. He's net by his career has been as a first baseman, but they're moving him to the outfield. And at least he makes contact and things like that. I wanted to see it back then. I want to see it now. Nothing's changed. And Nolan Jones, sometimes it's like, okay, I bought this lottery ticket. That's when you trade Tyler Freeman for Nolan Jones. That's what it is. And, okay, it's by the way, this has nothing to do with anything. So I'm at the airport. This sounds like a Heinz thing.
Yeah.
And with this lady in front of me gets off, and she makes a beeline straight for the lotto machine, that you buy at the airport. And I'm thinking, I don't know whether she felt lucky on the plane or whatever. I can't wait to get back home so I could buy a lotto ticket. I mean, what was that?
Wow, interesting.
That's it. I have no
further
thoughts. It must have been feeling it. I don't think it went well for nights because I saw her take one. She was shaking her head, and then she didn't stop her. She was going.
Oh, they were scratch-off tickets.
Yeah, or something. I don't know. I don't know what it was. All right. So that's basically what Tyler Freeman for Nolan Jones was.
A scratch-off ticket. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a maybe it's your day, but probably not. So anyway, Kafis is, to me, he's just more intriguing because the downside to me as a hitter is not as great as both, whether we're talking about Nolan Jones or we're talking about Nolan Jones or Big Christmas. I mean, I'm looking for his career coming into this year. He struck out 129 times and like 550 at bats, plate appearances. Fine, let's take a look at it. And I want to see it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
All right. So Kafis, you want to see? We've been talking about that for a couple of weeks and how that's a move they should make. I need to ask about Bo Naylor.
Okay.
and the catching situation and how you would handle that. So Bo Naylor, they moved him up into the 2 hole recently, and
Oh,
it's
what was that?
well, I mean, Stephen Vogt was talking about how they want to give him a different look and that he's earned opportunities, had some good at bats, but it's not going so well. I think he was 0 for 4
Yeah.
in the loss to the Dodgers on Tuesday,
No,
and I think he's
no,
hitting 191. So
no.
back down to the bottom, and
Yeah.
do you still keep the rotation in a given week the way it is with Bo Naylor and Hedges in terms of who's catching how many games?
Yeah.
What do you want to do with the catching situation?
Well, they don't have a lot of alternatives. I mean, you keep playing Naylor, but at least one thing when you get from Hedges, I mean, his fans don't care about it. I understand that. They go, he's batting 102 or something. But his defense is extraordinary. Now, I didn't see them on TV for the last week, but I forget the last game. There was twice runners on third, and he blocked balls that maybe Naylor gets, maybe he doesn't, but not too many players could block those balls. Those are run saving plays, and he is exceptional for that. Oh, another aside. So when we're going through Wyoming, we had Sirius FM, and after we do some of these hikes, so we're kind of let's catch up on the Guardians and that. And I'll tell you, it really does make you appreciate Hamilton and Jim Rosenhaus too, all the more because they have a nice chemistry together. And so we are listening a little bit to the Twins broadcasters. I don't know who they were, but then again, listening to them, I don't know what happened in the game because they did not want to ever recap. They just I don't understand how Sirius works all the time, but it seems like you don't always get, the broadcasters from like your home. I was looking for Hamilton, but anyway, I got the Twins. It was terrible. It was a terrible broadcast. I mean, just there. Then I will say this: the Tigers, Dickerson was the main guy there. They were very good. It was much like Cleveland's broadcast. The guys for the Twins would say, and the Twins moved ahead on a 2-run homer in the 5th, and I'm going, well, who hit it? How hard is it? The broadcasters, they have to think and remember, and our TV guys sometimes don't do this here, is like you need to recap. Not everybody is listening to every word and watching every inning. Where I do think Hamilton and Rosie do a very good job of going back over it, and the Tigers guys did too. So that's my thought. Anybody ever, I'm just curious if any fans care about that stuff, or am I the only
Oh,
one?
I'm sure. I mean, you know how it is. You're out doing
Yeah,
yard work or whatever.
right, exactly.
You'll turn the game on in the 3rd inning, and it's like, all right, well, what happened? And,
I mean, maybe you came off a trail in Wyoming and you saw a moose. Now you want to know, like, what's going on with these guys?
Yeah.
So that was mine. Because, we heard the Twins guys, and then we heard the Tigers guys, and then we got Hammy on Monday, our last day in Wyoming, for whatever reason. I guess because they're playing the Dodgers. I don't know how Sirius does this. We were able to find the Cleveland broadcast. So.
All right, nice. All right, what else on the Guardians, Terry? So a couple of pitchers. I don't know if you want to talk about both of them in one thing or not, but Tristan McKenzie is trying to work out the kinks in Goodyear. They're out there in Arizona trying to get his mechanics back on track and his control. And then Joey Cantillo, they're having him go down to the minors, and they're going to try and stretch him out from maybe 40 to 50 pitches to where he can start when they bring him back up. How do you feel about either one of those? And I know you always say that if somebody's not on the roster and not available,
you can't. The Earl Weaver thing. You're dead to me.
Yeah.
But no, and he would just say, I'm thinking day to day. He didn't. He worked with Hank Peters back then. It was Hank Peters. In other words, it would be Hank Peters' job, the GM job, to fix Tristan McKenzie. But don't ask me about him until I see him.
Right.
But somebody needs. McKenzie's such a good person and such a hard worker that a lot of times when I say they're taking a guy completely kind of out of circulation, to take it back to the garage and break it down, I'm going, well, that has no chance. But I would say this: if there is a chance of that kind of dramatic move helping a player, it would be Tristan. Now, I don't know the condition of his arm and that kind of stuff, but I would go back. This is a John Hart thing. You don't know what to do, have him throw from the stretch and come out of the bullpen. They sort of tried it, but not really. They were all over the place with that. Now, Cantillo, he's a left-hander with pretty good stuff, and they're desperate for starting pitching. So why not have him go 4 or 5 innings? Right now, even we used to say if you go 6 or 7 innings and under 2 runs, they want to build a statue to you. Now it's like 5 innings. If you get 5 innings out of a guy. And I was sad to see what happened with Ciccone. What's his injury? Is it a groin thing or
Yeah,
something?
groin. Yeah.
I tell you, I saw the games, his 2 games. He's got some pretty good stuff. I think that there's something there. That's why they traded for him. But this is just a never-ending quest for pitchers. By the way, I mean, we all love Jose Ramirez, but you should hear the Tiger broadcasters talking about Jose. It's like, this guy's been killing us forever. And it's like, he goes, he went down on one knee and he just ripped a double down the left field line. How do you do that? It's like, oh, and they keep rolling out his stats against the Tigers. It makes you appreciate him and then the other guy, there's a guy, he plays every day. He plays so hard.
He's like what Miguel Cabrera used to do to
Yeah,
Cleveland.
right,
every
exactly.
year.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, they spoke like in these off-field terms about Jose, and I just thought that was so. And the respect they have for the Guardians, it goes, they're good every year. They really are. And of course, the Tigers are trying to get back to that with AJ Hinch and that, and they had a really good year last year and there. So it was fun just to get good broadcasters, I may underline, from the opposing team, listening to them talking about the team you cover. To give a different perspective.
Yeah. All right, Terry. So I'm not trying to be overly dramatic here, but I'm going to contend that I think this is a really big next week for the Guardians coming up. So they're off tomorrow after they finish the series with the Dodgers today. They have the Angels at home, and then they're off Monday. Then they go to the Yankees next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they're back home against Houston. In the meantime, while they're in New York, the Detroit Tigers will be playing in Chicago against one of the worst teams in baseball, the Chicago White Sox. And if it's hard to win in New York, I mean, everybody knows that. I'm just thinking that this Kefis thing, it might be time for them to start thinking about making some kind of moves here to shake things up, because they could look up and be out 9 games by the time we're talking next week.
Yesterday or last week is time for that. Okay, I agree. Because you didn't go to the next series with Houston. Houston always gives Cleveland a hard time. So I would say those next 6 games. And with the Reds, you got the whole Tito thing going on. And I remember that one game with Tito early on when he beat Cleveland. It's like he went at that like a playoff game, the way he used those bullpen guys and that. And didn't he use as a closer like 3 days in a row in that series or something? So I'll lump those 9 games together. If they come out of their 5-4, I'll be thrilled. I just think they're going to be rough games. And then they had to go to the West Coast, Seattle. Now I'm not going to go too far out, but I'm with you on. First of all, you got to get past. You got you got the Angels coming in. Now it's time to really do something against them, win some games, and then the Yankees. I have tremendous respect for Houston. And so, you don't want to bury yourself.
Yeah, I mean, again, not to be overly dramatic, I think that there's 4 teams in the American League who have a better record than the Guardians, so they're in it. I think things could slip very quickly here if they don't kind of start getting things together and shoring up this lineup a little bit.
Yeah, they that kind of thing, and of course they're always worried about their starting pitching for good reason. That's what this Cantillo thing is about, and. You look at the minors, it's just not a lot else coming real quick. It's really it's just a shame my guy Brito, with his thumb, fractured his thumb, because he was really hitting down there, and that would have allowed you, because at second base are filling in with Schneemann and these other guys, that would have allowed you to go forward. And Arias has certainly cooled off at the plate too. It's a challenge. And by the way, I forget whether it was Neil or whatever person wrote in about the bottom 4, the order on that last Tiger Day.
Mm-hmm.
You may want to play these guys. You just don't want to play them all at once in a series. No,
it's hard to win.
Don't do that.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Browns, Terry. They are in OTAs this week out in Berea, and be sure to check all of our coverage. Again, it's Wednesday. We're taping this, and we have our full crew out in Berea covering Brown stuff today. Just go to cleveland.com/Browns. You'll see all that today. Mary Kay Cabot, our colleague, posted a story yesterday about 10 questions that she has going into OTAs, and obviously the headlining battle is the quarterbacks and the four guys out there. And Mary Kay said her order right now is Pickett, Gabriel, and then Flacco, Sanders, 3-4 or 4-3, depending on what day it is, maybe. But I wanted to ask you, what is your biggest question that you have about the Browns going into OTAs here, other than the quarterbacks? Like, what are you most concerned about or eager to see?
Okay, one of the things they did is they went in big to keep Myles Garrett. They decided to keep Myles Garrett and not trade him for picks or whatever. And then, of course, they paid him a gigantic contract. That means you want an elite defense. Will they have it? And now the JOK thing, he's out for the year, and we pray that he would be able to come back following year, but he's done. So, in other words, the players that they have, and the Wessinger, what's the name of the kid they drafted from
Schlesinger.
UCL?
Carson Schlesinger. Yep.
Yes, which I've heard really good things about from the Browns, what they saw. This kid needs to be an impact player. So I will say, can the Browns have an impact defense with that kid being an impact player? That's one of my big questions. Because
I've even seen some things about him maybe being a Rookie of the Year winner this year, defensive rookie, because he's going to play a lot, right?
A lot. And he could play the middle. He's a tackling machine, they say, that kind of stuff. So I just think that's a really good thing. I am confident, we'll talk about this. I'm confident the Browns will have a good running game between all the kids they drafted and Jerome Ford. I think that's going to be really improved. Now, you could always say offensive line, just about it's sort of like pitching, your bullpen. It's kind of like every year you're always kind of worried about your bullpen, even if it's been good. But I just say, will Schlesinger be that impact guy? And will the Browns get back to being a top 10 defense? That's a good one. Other thing. And also then, Jim Schwartz, this is his thing. He was a genius 2 years ago and not so much this last year. Can he get the mojo back with the guys they have? You got one?
All right. Yeah, I'm going to move to the other side of the ball. I just wonder who's going to catch passes this year among the wide receivers. I mean, you have Jerry Jeudy, obviously, but other than that, there's just a bunch of guys who are just walking question marks, like Deontay Johnson. Again, a lottery ticket, right? A scratch off.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
But here's a guy who he was with 3 teams last year, and none of them wanted him back, and they brought him in at the veteran minimum, and this could be it for him, right? And I think which is a good. If you're going to get a guy like him, to have him know that it's his last chance, that might be some motivation.
But if you're talking about him as your number 2 receiver,
yeah, I mean, he hasn't had 1,000. He had a 1,000-yard season, I think, back in 2021.
Who's your other receivers? What, Tillman?
So you have Cedric Tillman, Michael Woods, David Bell, and Jamari Thrash, who we saw a little bit of flash from last year. But it's like those are out of that group, you got to find 2, 3, and even 4.
I've always liked David Bell. I always have. So I'm staying in the David Bell camp. Not he's a star, but I think you play. Now, from what the Browns people have told me, and I think there's some legit thought to this, by bringing in Fannin from Toledo, and then
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green, excuse me. Yeah, Toledo wishes they had him.
We'll be getting a bunch of emails from our Bowling Green fans.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I apologize to Bowling Green fans. Senior moment. Remember, I'm just off vacation. I'm talking to you. Between Fannin from Bowling Green and Njoku, they just believe that they're going to really get back to throwing to the tight ends more, and that can really help them. That's their thought process. But in the meantime, as you say, it's a rummage sale after Jeudy at wide receiver.
There was a really good story that people should check out. Lance Reisland, who's our film breakdown analyst, had a post up yesterday. He did a whole look at 12 personnel that the Browns could run with. And for those who know football or don't, 12 personnel is 1 running back and 2 tight ends. And if your two tight ends are Fannin and Njoku, that's a pretty good way to get some matchups. But Lance did a whole breakdown. Check that out. It kind of shows a route tree that Fannin could run if they split him out wide. And yeah, worth your time. So check that out. But I think that's a good point, Terry, that you're making is these two tight ends might be their second leading receiver this year or third.
I know this. They looked at the receivers versus the tight ends in that third round, and they had a much higher grade on Fannin than they did on any of the receivers at that point. You know, you could always look back at the draft and see. So that's why they decided to do it. And I have a hard time arguing with taking a guy that would catch 114 passes or something like that at Bowling Green, and you know that teams are stacked up trying to stop him. So I'm good with that. I'm not so sure that with Deontay Johnson, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
Bringing in a guy, I know it's a scratch off or whatever, but guys, I much almost prefer a guy coming off an injury than a guy coming off attitude problems.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And again, it's low risk and potential reward. If it doesn't work out, you just put them out on the waiver wire and it's over. So,
okay.
All right. Well, the Browns will be doing OTAs like we mentioned this weekend next, and they'll be heading into mini camp in June before they take a break for the summer and then return in July for training camp. So, okay, Terry, I think you said you have a book of the week this week.
Yes, I do. Picked this one up in Wyoming, but you can get it anywhere. The summer of 1840, excuse me, how about reading the title right? The summer of 1876. The summer of 1876. The author is Chris Weimer, Wimmer. It's his first book. It's a history, but it's written of that summer, which is a summer when General George Custer decided he's going to take on the entire Lakota and Sioux Nation and the Cheyennes on top of it, and kind of what all came on there. But he also is the subhead is Outlaws, Lawmen, and Legends in the season that defined the American West. But this is back when Jesse James and his brothers were holding up banks and getting into shootouts, and when Wild Bill Hickok, who kind of went from a sheriff for a little while to professional bank gambler, got shot in the back in Deadwood, and it was a crazy time. It was like America came out of the Civil War, and just everything, the gold rush and cards and the expansion, and there was a feeling like not only that anything could happen in the country growing, but almost anything goes. And part of the book is spent with the United States Cavalry trying to chase around Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull all over the West to catch them, and they can't find them. And also then half of the lawmen in the middle of the country chasing around after the James brothers. And it's just, it's wild. It's pretty good history. I mean, as a writer, I could see how I would break the book down a little different to make it even more readable. But I read it on 4 days, and Summer of 1876 by Chris Weimer, Wimmer.
And so sometimes when I travel, I'll try and find a band that's from the area that I'm visiting. So you were out in Wyoming reading this, and not far from where a lot of this stuff was going down. It must have been really neat, right?
Yeah, it was. And in some of the areas where they were, Crazy Horse was like a great general, and this guy was always as they would say, cheating, hiding behind rocks and things, and ambushing and disappearing, and he was well ahead of his time, and I just really enjoyed it. And Custer, the whole that thing's been written about a million times, and I've read some very good books on it, but I found this part really interesting too, of kind of the three guys that were out there leading, a guy named Major Reno and a guy named Benteen and Custer, and their interactions or lack thereof, that kind of stuff. It's finally they called off one of the searches for trying to, after the Little Bighorn, where the slaughter of Custer was, and they're chasing around, and finally one of the generals decided, we're tired, we're going home to Fort Lincoln, and his major under him, a guy named Muir, says, yes, we decided to quit because, he said, in pursuit of the in pursuit of the Sioux Nation. They just decided not to be found, and we said that's fine with us. It's kind of like, okay, you don't want to fight? Well, really, neither do we after all of this.
Just call the whole thing off.
A guy named Thomas Weir is the guy who said that, I believe. But it just busted me up. And on top of that, I believe he wrote a letter to like one of the newspapers. That's the other thing these guys would do back then. Sometimes they would like write a letter and say anonymous to somebody else ripping another general.
Man.
Well, because we have
everything was wild back then.
Yeah, right. They just let it rip.
Yeah. All right, the summer of 1876. Thanks for that one, Terry.
Okay.
All right, I think we're good here, right? Anything else you want to mention real quick?
That is it.
Okay, I did want to talk for a second about Tom Hamilton. We've been asking listeners to send in their Tom Hamilton memories, or maybe you met him somewhere and had some story to tell about that. Just email us at our address, which is sports@cleveland.com, and just put Terry's Talkin or Tom Hamilton or both in the subject line. We've been getting some really good ones in, Terry, so I'm going to load those up. And as we get closer, the Hall of Fame induction for Tom Hamilton will be the weekend of July 25th, 26th, 27th in Cooperstown. It's going to be a memorable time, and we would love to hear your stories about Tom Hamilton. So send those in, and we will try to get those on the podcast as we go along here. So, all right, we're good. Thanks to everybody for listening. We'll be back next week, and we will see you then on Terry's Talking.